chapters 1 through 7 of the book of Job. Chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Luz named Job. He was true and upright, and feared God, and avoided wrong. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters born to him, and his possessions were 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, a very large estate, so that the man was greater than all the Beni Kedem. His sons were accustomed often to feast at the house of each other, and would send and invite their sisters to eat and drink with them. But when the days of festivity had gone round, Job would send and sanctify them in the morning, and offer burnt offerings for the whole. For Job reflected, "It may be my children have sinned by not thanking God in their hearts." Job continually behaved thus. But the day came when the sons of God advanced to report themselves before the Lord, and the accuser also was amongst them. And when the Lord asked the accuser, "Where do you come from?" the accuser answered the Lord and said, "From flying over the earth and traveling in it." Then the Lord asked the accuser, "Have you fixed your attention upon my servant Job, that there is not a man like him upon earth, honest and upright, who fears God and avoids wrong?" The accuser, however, answered the Lord and said, "Does Job reverence God for nothing? Have you not made a fence for him and his family and all that he has all round? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his property has extended over the country. But perhaps if you stretched out your hand and destroyed all he possesses, he would curse you to your face." The Lord consequently replied to the accuser, "Whatever he has shall be in your power, except that you shall not exert your hand upon himself." So the accuser departed from the presence of the Lord. Then another day arrived when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their eldest brother, when a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the she-asses grazing near them, when the Shabim fell on and seized them, and have assaulted their attendants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to inform you." Whilst he was speaking, another came and said, "The fire of God has fallen from the skies, and has consumed the flocks and their attendants, and destroyed them, except myself, and I only have escaped to inform you." Whilst he was yet speaking, another came and said, "The Kasdim collected in 3 troops, and rushed upon the camels, and seized them, and have assaulted their attendants with the edge of the sword, except myself, and I only have escaped to tell you." While he was speaking, another came and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, when a great storm came from over the desert, and seized the 4 corners of the house, and flung it down upon the youths, and killed them, except myself, and I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose, and tore his robe, and shaved his head, and threw himself upon the ground, and worshipped, and said, "I came naked from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In this Job did not sin, nor accuse God of injustice. Chapter 2. Another day arrived when the sons of God reported themselves to the Lord, and the accuser reported himself amongst them to the Lord, when the Lord asked the accuser, "Where do you come from?" And the accuser answered the Lord and said, "From flying over the earth, and up and down in it." The Lord then asked the accuser, "Have you fixed your attention on my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, an honest and upright man, who fears God and turns from wrong, who yet retains his virtues, although you induced me to causelessly afflict him?" The accuser, however, replied to the Lord and said, "Skin to skin! A man will give all that he has for his life. Perhaps if you were to extend your hand now and torture his bones and his flesh, he would curse you to your face." So the Lord answered the accuser and said, "Look, he is in your power, except that you shall regard his life." The accuser consequently went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with a painful ulcerous inflammation, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a potsherd to scrape himself with, and he sat down amongst the ashes. His wife, however, said to him, "Will you stick to your virtues? Curse God and die." But he replied to her, "You speak as one of the worthless women speak. We accepted comforts from God, so should we not also accept discomfort?" In all that, Job did not sin with his lips. Now 3 friends of Job heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, so each came from his house: Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, and agreed to go and mourn with him and comfort him. But when they from a distance raised their eyes and could not recognize him, they lifted up their voices and wept, and each tore his robe and flung dust on their heads, and were stupefied, and sat with him for 7 days and 7 nights on the earth, but did not speak to him, for they saw that his despair was great. Chapter 3. At length Job opened his mouth and cursed his day. And Job exclaimed and said, "Perish the day I was born, when night said, 'A man is conceived.' Let that day be darkness itself. Let God not look down from above, nor shine upon it with his light. Let death's gloomy shadow avenge. Black clouds make their resting place there, and terrors in daytime affright. Count it not in the course of the year, nor reckon along with the months. Let solitude be in that night, that in it no joy may be heard. Let them curse it who curse at the day, those stripped to be offered the snake. Let the stars of its dawning be dark. Let it long for, but never have light, and see not the eyelids of morn. For it closed not the doors of the womb, nor hid my distress from my sight. Why died I not in the womb, or expired in the act of my birth? Oh, why did the knees give support, and why did the breasts that I sucked? For then I had lain and been still, then had rest and found ease for myself with the kings and the statesmen of earth, who build themselves desolate tombs, or with princes along with their gold, who fill up their graves with their wealth, or had been like abortions concealed, like children that never see light, where the wicked must cease from their crimes, where the strong, when exhausted, have rest, where together the captives can lie and hear not their driver's fierce voice, where the small and the great are alike, and the slave from his master is free. Oh, why give the wretched the light and life to the bitter in soul, who long for, but cannot meet death, dig more than for treasure for him, who delight and will even exult, and are glad when they find out the tomb. To a man on a path that is lost, and whose landmarks his God has confused, for my sighing comes up with my food, and my groanings like water poured out. For the terror I fear has arrived, and that which I dreaded has come. I invited peace, quiet, and rest, but instead, savage tumult steps in. Chapter 4. Eliphaz the Temanite, however, replied and said, "If we speak you a word, will you fret? But who can his excitement restrain? Consider how many you taught and strengthened the hands of the weak. Your speaking supported the faint, and you strengthened the trembling knees. But now it has come on yourself. You stagger and grieve at its touch. Was not your religion your trust, and your trueness in action your hope? Think, where are the innocent lost, and where are the upright destroyed? I see that the plowers for vice and the sowers of wrong reap the crop. Undone by the blast sent from God, they waste in his tempest of wrath. As lions and roaring bears moan, and the teeth of the tiger will fail, and old lions perish for prey, and the young of the leopards will faint. For a word once came stealing to me, and my ears caught a rustle of sound, in thoughts and in visions of night, when deep slumber falls upon men. Then terror and trembling approached, and my powerful frame was afraid. Then a breathing flowed over my face, the hair on my body stood up. It stopped, but I saw not its form. The appearance approached to my sight. It stopped, but I heard like a voice. Can man be more righteous than God? Than his master a mortal more pure? Look, in his servants he cannot confide, and he finds in his angels defects. More in us, who reside in clay huts, built on dust, that are crushed by a moth. We who die between dawn and the dusk, who unnoticed continuously fade, whose vitality fritters away, who die before wisdom is reached. Chapter 5. Call now, who will answer to you? And to whom of the saints will you turn? For the fool by vexation is slain, and the silly is killed by his rage. I have looked on the vile taking root, but I marked out his home for a crash. His children are far from secure. They fail in the gate without help. Their harvests the famished will eat, and the parched seize their coolers of snow, and the hungry will swallow their wealth. No, affliction springs not from the dust, nor does grief grow up out of the ground. But man himself causes his grief, as the children of flame fly upright. For myself I should cry out to God, to the Almighty present my address, who does great and unsearchable things, and wonders unnumbered are his, who gives rain to the mouth of the earth, sends the brooks on the face of the meads, who raises the lowly on high, and saves the depressed by his power, who frustrates the plans of the rogues, so their hands cannot work out their wish, who captures the skilled by their craft, and baffles their villainous schemes, so that darkness o'ershadows their day, and at noontide they grope as at night. Thus he rescues the weak from their mouth, and the wretched from clutch of their hand. So therefore the weak have a hope, and iniquity closes her mouth. But blessed is the man God corrects. So despise not the Almighty's reproof. For he grieves us, and he can console. He breaks us, but his hand can heal. He will save you 6 times from distress, and in 7 the woe will not touch. In famine will free you from death, and in war from the hand of the sword. He will hide from the lash of the tongue. Yes, unmoved at destruction's approach. You can laugh at destruction and death, and fear not the beast of the field. With the stones on the plain you make league, while the beasts of the field are your friends. And you know that your tent is secure, and muster your folds and miss none. You will know that your seeds will increase, and grow like the grass from the ground. You will go in old age to the tomb, as the cornstack is piled at its time. These we have proved, they are sure. Attend, and instruct your own yourself. Chapter 6. But Job replied and said, Who will carefully weigh out my grief, and poise all my woes in the scale? for they outweigh the sand of the sea. My words have in consequence weight. I am pierced by the Almighty's darts, whose poison my spirit drinks up, and against me all God's terrors fight. Does the zebra bray over the grass? Does the ox bellow over its food? Can the tasteless be ate without salt? What flavor has white of an egg? What myself would refuse to have touched, in my sickness is offered as food. Who will help me to gain my request? Will God ever give me my hope, and crush me at last to my joy? Swing his hand out and dash me to bits? Then I should at least be consoled, though I shrink from the unsparing pain. See, I hide not my innermost thoughts, for what is my strength or my hope? What object for lengthening my life? Is my strength like the hardness of stones? Is my body compounded of bronze? Alas, there is no one to ease, and from me all deliverance has gone. To the burdened his friends should be kind, lest he lose for the Almighty respect. But my friends have betrayed like a brook. They pass like the rush from a storm. They are black with the ice on their top. Their sources are hid in the snow. But they vanish in periods of warmth. In the heat they have gone from their place. They turn from the paths of their course. They go up in vapor and fade. Teman's caravans trusted to them. The merchants of Sheba relied. They came, but their trust is betrayed. They relied, but their hope is deceived. And you are like them, are you not? You see me depressed, and you shrink. Have I asked you to grant me a gift, or to give me a part of your wealth, or relieve from the hand of distress, or redeem from the hand that afflicts? Inform me, and I will be still. Instruct me in what I am wrong. How strong are ideas that are right! But what do your arguments prove? Do you think that your speeches convince? Like the wind are the thoughts of despair? Why should you, the helpless, assail and dig out a pit for your friend? But now be contented to watch and see if I lie to your face. Examine and be not unjust. Yes, search, for my right is in that. Is there a disease in my tongue that I cannot decide between things? Chapter 7. Has man not a warfare on earth? His days are like hireling's days. He pants like a slave for the shade, and hopes like a workman for wage. And so I bear wearisome months, and nights of distress are my lot. If I lay myself down, I exclaim, when will gloom cease that I may arise? And am filled with disturbance till dawn. Worms and clods are the garments I wear. My skin is all wrinkled and melts. My days are the weft of a loom. They drop by the break of a thread. Remember, my life is a breath, nor shall I come back to see good. While you look upon me, I am gone. The eye will not see me that saw. Like a cloud that consumes and is gone, man goes to his grave, nor returns. He never returns to his home. He gazes no more on his house. I will not therefore govern my wrath. I will speak in my anguish of soul and complain in my sorrow of life. Am I like the serpent of seas, that a keeper is placed over me? When I say, now my couch will relieve, my bed will assuage my complaint, you terrify me in my dreams, and at visions I suddenly start, and my soul has desire to be choked, for death than to be in my frame. I hate life. I would not always live. Go away, for my days are a shade. What is man that you let him grow up, and why set your heart upon him? Why visit at dawning of day, and then suddenly bring him to grief? Will you not grant this trifle to me, to swallow my spittle in peace? Have I sinned, O you guardian of men? Yet why set me up as your mark, and make me a load to myself? And why not forgive me my sin, and sweep all my passions away? For soon I shall lie in the dust, and when I am sought for, be not. The end of chapters 1 through 7. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 8. Bildad the Shuhite, however, answered and said,
How long will you babble such things, raising storms with the words of your mouth? Is God a perverter of law? Will the Highest distort what is right? If your children have sinned against him, by their sin he has driven them away. While you, had you sought for your God, and to the Almighty had prayed, if you had been pure and upright, even now he would rise up for you and prosper your righteous abode. Although your beginnings were small, your future would grow very great. For ask of the primeval race, and their ancestral wisdom seek out. We are ignorant, born yesterday. Our days are a shadow on earth. Will they not instruct you and tell and bring out these words from their hearts? Can the flag grow without mire? Can bulrushes grow without streams? Whilst green and while not yet cut down, they wither before any plant. So do all who abandon their God, and the hopes of the profligate fade, whose confidence will be cut off, and his trust be a spider's frail web. If he leans on his web, it will break. If he clings, it will never endure. At sunrise, he seems a fresh plant. O'er his garden he spreads out his boughs. His roots are deep down in a hill, and tighten their grip round the rocks. But if he is torn from his place, it denies him with, I know you not. See, that is the joy of his course. Yet others will spring from his dust. But God casts not the upright away, nor strengthens the hand of the bad. He could yet fill your mouth with delight, and make you exult with your lips, and clothe all your haters in shame, but the tents of the wicked collapse.
Chapter 9. Job, however, responded and said, I acknowledge that it is a truth, that no man can be just before God. If one wished to contend against him, not one in 1,000 could speak. Wise-hearted, almighty in force, who can resist him with success? Who casts down the hills unawares, and o'erwhelms in his anger and wrath? who shakes the land out of its place, and makes the supports of it rock, at whose order the sun would not shine, and he even can seal up the stars, who only can stretch out the skies and walk on the waves of the sea, who made the fixed star of the north, the bright way, and the halls of the south, who does great and inscrutable things, and wonders that no one can count. He passes, but I see him not. He flits by, and I do not perceive. When he snatches, who then can resist? Who can say to him, "What would you do?" God turns not away from our wrath. To him the proud giants must bow. Then how could I answer to him, or against him arrange all my thoughts? Were I right, I could never debate, but must humbly entreat to my judge. If I called, and he answered to me, am I sure he would list to my voice? Who sweeps me as though with a storm, and strikes me with wounds without cause? Who hinders me drawing my breath? Who has gorged me with bitterest griefs? As to power, how mighty he is! As for right, who dare witness for me? Am I righteous? My mouth would convict. Am I honest? I may be deceived. I am honest. Know I not my soul? And yet I despise my own life. But this I assert as a fact. He destroys both the good and the bad. He kills as with some sudden lash, and laughs at the victims who shriek, gives the earth to the hand of the bad, and muffles the mouth of the judge. If it is not he, then who does? But my days are more swift than a post. They run forward and never find rest. Like the ships of the pirates sail off, like eagles that pounce on their prey. If I say, I care not for my woes, I will loosen my face and will smile. I am terrified still by my griefs, for I know that you will not release. I know I am wicked myself. Why then should I labor in vain? If I wash myself white as the snow, and make my hands clean with the soap, you would plunge me again in a ditch, and my clothing would shrink from myself. For a man like myself could not speak, nor bring us together to plead. For no one exists to decide and control both of us by his hand. From me let him take off his rod, and not by his terrors oppress. For then I could speak and not fear, but not in the state I now am.
Chapter 10.
My body is weary of life. I abandon myself to complaint. I will speak in the grief of my mind. And I beg of God not to convict. Inform me for what you contend. Is oppression a pleasure to you, to despise the poor work of your hand, and prosper the plans of the bad? Have you only the eyes of a man, or see but as mortals perceive? Are your days like the days of mankind, or your years like the period of man? That you hunt to find out my defects, and seek to discover my sin, when you know that I am not depraved, and that none can relieve from your hand? It was your hand that formed me and made and compacted. Then why now destroy? Remember, you made me from clay, that to dust you will make me return. And did you not curdle like milk, and fixed me together like cheese,
then clothed me with skin, and with flesh, and with bones, and with muscles compact, and gave me my life and my reason, then last fixed my spirit in me? Though you hid all these things in your heart, I know the result was from you, and that you would observe if I sinned, and would not acquit from my guilt. If wicked, alas, then for me. If righteous, I raise not my head. Be content with my shame, see my woe. Like a lion he rises to seize, and you are turned from me estranged. Against me you heap up the proofs, increasing your anger with me, and against me your armies are massed. So why did you bring from the womb? Oh, would I had died, and none seen, as though I had never had life, and had gone from the womb to the grave. Are not my days fading and few? Oh, leave me a moment of rest, ere I go whence I never return, to the land of the black-shadowed gloom, to the land where the brightness is black, like the shadow of death, where there are no columns of light, and whose glitter is black.
Chapter 11. Zophar the Naamathite, however, replied and said, Your number of words answer not. No man is made right by his lips. For your chatter should men become still, and your sneering should no one resent? For you say, My conduct was spotless, and I have been pure in your sight. How I wish God would grant you a word, and against you would open his lips, and teach you the wisdom unseen. For his knowledge and power are wide. It would teach you God pardons your faults. Can you find out God by research, though intently you seek the Most High? Mount to heaven. Yet what can you do? Explore then the grave. What is found? He extends beyond limits of earth, and further than stretches the sea. If he turns and decides and proclaims, who then can resist to his will? For he knows when a mortal is vile, sees his vice that himself does not know. But man has a heart that is dull. Man is born but a wild ass's colt. Yet if you will order your heart, and spread out your hands before him, if you throw out your faults from your grasp, nor let wickedness dwell in your tent, you can lift up your face without shame. You then can be bold and not fear. Your sufferings will then be forgot, or remembered like streams that are past. And your lifetime arise to its noon, for your life will break out into dawn, bringing comfort because there is hope. And be shamed for your trust in the false, and rest and have nothing to fear. And many will seek for your face, but the eyes of the wicked will fail, and to them shall no refuge remain, for their hope is their very last breath. Chapter 12. Job, however, answered,
No doubt but that you are the men, and that wisdom will die with yourselves. But I have a mind like your own, and I am not inferior to you. But who does not know things like these? Yet I am a joke to my friends. Let him call to his God for reply. The upright and just are despised. Those resting in light scorn a lamp, which is prized by those feeling their steps. Yet the tents of the plunderers prosper, and God makes the ruffians secure. And God brings the wealth to the stores of those whose sole God is their power. Even ask of the beasts to instruct, and the birds of the skies to inform, or the weeds of the earth who can teach, or the fish of the sea to relate. Such rubbish as yours, who knows not?
For the hand of the Lord has done this, in whose hand is the breath of all life, with the soul that resides in each man. But cannot the ear taste of words, as the palate distinguishes food? Let it be that the old man is wise, and that those of long days understand. Yet with him reside wisdom and power, with him are reflection and thought. Look, he throws down, and none can rebuild, shuts up, and no man can release. He holds back the waters, they fly. He releases, and then the land floods. Both strength and perfection are his. His are the oppressor and oppressed. He leads the contrivers to plunder, but yet makes their punishment shine. He expands the dominion of kings and girdles their loins with might, but yet lets the priesthoods be captured, and the mightiest he overwhelms. From the eloquent he takes the lip, and deprives the old men of their sense. On princes he pours out contempt, and loosens the belt of the great, uncovers the depths of the gloom, brings light to the shadow of death. He nations exalts and depresses, or the nations extends, and they last, yet takes sense from the heads of the earth, and they wander in wastes without paths. They grope in the dark without light, and they stagger like men who are drunk. Chapter 13. Mine eyes have observed all these things. I have heard, and my ears understood. What you know, I know that myself. I am no more a fool than you are. Now I will address the Most High, and to God I will turn with my plea. For you are but painters of falsehood, and worthless physicians are you. I wish you would keep yourselves silent, for that is your far wisest plan, and listen to me while I reason, and attend to the plea of my lips. Why will you talk folly for God? Why utter your falsehoods as his? For can you his presence exalt? Are you the defenders of God? When he searches, will he approve you, if you flatter as you flatter men? Be assured that he will reprove if you flatter by falsehood his state. And should you not reverence his height, and should not his dread fall on you? Reflect that your proverbs are dust, and your maxims are mountains of mud. Keep silent to me while I speak. I myself let come on me what may. I am mad, with my flesh in my teeth, and I put my life into my hand. Let him kill me, yet I do not care. In his presence I plead for my course. Perhaps he will save me himself, for villains dare not seek his face. Listen to what I can say, and I will explain to your ears. For now I arrange my defense. I know my acquittal is sure. Who is it against me will plead? I then will be silent and die. Oh, only grant two things for me. Then I will not hide from your face. Remove this affliction away, and let not your terror o'erwhelm. Then summon, and I will respond, or let me speak, and you can reply. Say what are my vices and sins. Oh, teach me my frailties and faults. For what do you hide up your face, and think me a foeman of yours? And why do you chase withered leaves, or
hunt after stubble dried up, that you write against me bitter things, and clothe with the sins of my youth, and fasten my feet in the stocks, and watch to find my hidden ways, and examine the marks of my feet, and that here I am rotting away, like a garment that moths have consumed.
Chapter 14.
Man, who is born of a woman, for a few days, and those full of grief, who springs like a flower and is cut, who flies like a shadow unfixed. On such a thing why set your eyes, and why call me to judgment with you? To whom is it given to be pure? Not one can exist without stain. His years and his months are decreed. You fix his impassable bound. Then let him alone, let him rest, till he end like a workman his day. For the tree has a hope if cut down, for it sprouts, and its shoot does not fail. Though its roots have grown old in the earth, and its stump may decay in the dust, at the scent of the water it lives, and its boughs grow as planted anew. But man dies, and he withers away, and a mortal expires and is gone. Like the waters depart from a flage, and a torrent when scorched up and dried, so man must recline and not rise, nor wake till the skies are no more, nor arouse from the depth of his sleep. Who will help me to rest in the grave, to hide till your anger is past, and fix me a time for recall? For if the dead man is recalled, I would hope all the days of my war until my discharge would arrive. If you called me, then I would attend. You could order the creature you made. But now you are counting my steps, and closely are watching my sins. Seal up my defects in a bag, and my passions sew up with a seam. For a mountain falls down by degrees, and a rock can decay from its place. The stones are worn down by the brook, and the dust is swept off by a flood. But the hopes of mankind are destroyed. You crush, and he goes off forever. His form fades, and you send him away. He knows not if his sons come to fame. If they suffer, he cannot console. His body grieves but for himself, and his mind for himself only mourns.
The end of chapters 8 through 14. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 15. Then Eliphaz responded and said, How can wisdom discuss with the wind, fill his breast with a blast from the east, contending with beggarly words and speeches that never avail? Shame on you! You break all respect and degrade meditation with God. Your mouth is familiar with sin, and false reasons you choose for your tongue. Your own mouth shall convict you, not I, and your own lips shall answer yourself. Were you the first man that was born? Were you made before the high hills? Have you heard the counsel of God? And is science reserved to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? Understand, and it is not with us. The gray-headed are ours, and the old, more revered than your father for days. Are God's warnings a trifle to you, or with you has he spoken alone? Now what have you taken to heart, and at what are you rolling your eyes, that your fury you turn against God, and you fling out the words from your mouth? How can a man hold himself pure, and the son of a woman be just? Why, he cannot confide in his saints. and the skies are not clean in his sight, much less the corrupt and defiled, the man who sucks folly like drink. I will teach you, so listen to me. For what I have seen I relate. What the wise have reported to us, and their fathers have never concealed, to whom only the land had been given, and no stranger had passed in their midst. That the days of the wicked are torments, all the years of oppressors are fears. In peace terrors shout in their ears. Destruction is coming for you. He dare not turn out in the dark, for he fears an assault by the sword. He is startled at food at all times. He knows the dark day is at hand. Disturbance and trouble and anguish assail like a king armed for fight. For he stretches his hand against God and ventures against the Most High. He charges close up to his neck, to the hard bosses fixed in his shield. Though he covers his face with his helm, and strengthens his loins with flaps, yet in ruinous towns he shall dwell, in houses where none will reside, which are ready to fall into heaps. He never gains station or might, and his wealth does not last on the earth. He can never escape from his sin. His boughs shall be shriveled by flame, and he fades by the breath of its mouth. So let no one trust vain deceit, for deception will be his reward. Be paid him before it is due, and his branches will never be green. He will cast like the vine sour grapes, like the olive will scatter his bloom. For the house of the wicked is barren, fire burns up the tents of the vile, who breed evil and bring forth their sin, contriving deception from birth. Chapter 16. Job, however, answered and said,
Have I not heard plenty like that? What wretched counselors are you? Will the wind of your words have no end? Or does something incite to dispute? I also could speak like yourselves, if your souls were but now in my place. My speeches could tack upon you, and wag my head just as you do. But I would support by my words, and console by the play of my lips. If I speak, my grief is not the less, and if silent, it goes not from me. But now I am wasted away. All my family you have destroyed. My wrinkles are telling my tale. Liars rise and insult to my face. Against me they gnash with their teeth, and torturers flame with their eyes. And your mouths belch upon me reproach. Slap my cheek, and against me unite. For God has delivered to the bad, flung me to the hands of the vile. I was happy, but now I am crushed. He has seized on my neck, and has shook, and has set as a mark for his darts. My breast by his archers is pierced, my gall poured unjustly on earth. And he breaks me with breach upon breach, as when a fierce warrior assails. I have covered my skin with a sack, and my honor is rolled in the dust. My features are swollen with tears. My eyelids are shadows of death. Though no wrong has been found in my hand, and for purity always I prayed. Put no covering, earth, on my blood, and let not my shrieks be concealed. My witness I see in the skies, and my evidence is in the heights. Friends jeer, but to God my eye weeps, that a mortal might plead before God as a son of mankind for his friend. When my number of years has arrived, I shall walk on the unturning path.
Chapter 17.
My spirit is writhing in pain, my days flying fast to the grave, although my deriders withstand as an obstacle fixed in my sight. Oh, fix now my bail for yourself, but who will give bond on my part? For you take common sense from their hearts, and so you rely not on them to decide on the fate of their friend, so the sight of their children shall fail. I am placed as a proverb to men, and become a contempt in their sight. So with sadness my eyes are oppressed, and my form is consumed to a shade. The upright may wonder at this, and the clean from pollution be roused. But the righteous will hold on his way, and the pure-handed add to his strength. But all you, turn round and be off, for wisdom I find not in you. My days fly, my purposes fail. The cherished ideas of my heart, can they change the night into day by light that proceeds from the dark? When I measure my home in the grave, and in darkness I spread out my bed? When I call to my father, corruption, you, my mother and sister, the worm? But if so, then where is my hope? And my hope who can ever behold, when gone down with my frame to the grave, if together we rest in the dust?
Chapter 18. However, Bildad the Shuhite answered and said,
Pray, when will you stop in your talk? Be sensible, then we can speak. Why are we regarded as beasts, as something unclean in your sight? He tears up his soul in his rage. Should the earth be deserted for you, and the rocks be removed from their place? Yes, the light of the bad is put out, and the gleam from the flame of his fire. And the light in his tent shall be dark, and the lantern above it be quenched. His vigorous stridings will halt, and his tactics will lead to defeat. For his feet will be caught in his net, and himself bound about in his toils. His heel will be caught in a hole, a noose will be flung over him, a rope be concealed in the earth, and a trap for him laid on the road, be harassed by terrors all round, and his feet shall be broken to bits. A famine shall come on his strength, and destruction shall fix to his flank, devouring the skin of his limbs, and the firstborn of death gnaw his frame. His guard will be driven from his tent, and the king of the terrors march in. Who will dwell in his tent? No more his, and lightning be poured on his home. His root will be dried up below, and his branches be withered above. His memory will perish from earth, and his fame not remain in the streets. He be driven from dawn to the dark, and hunted away from the world, without son or grandson in his tribe, and none to survive in his home. The westerns will wonder at his day, and the easterns be seized with a fear. Yes, such are the homes of the bad, such the place not acknowledging God.
Chapter 19. Job, however, replied and said,
How long will you worry my life and make me feel crushed by your words? You have libeled me fully 10 times, and are yet not ashamed to revile? But grant it be true, I have sinned. My errors remain with myself. Why indeed should you swell up against and reproach me with my own disgrace? Admit that God has oppressed me, and his lasso has flung round my neck, that unanswered I cry in distress and appeal, but I have not a judge, that he blocks up the path I would go, and spreads darkness over my roads, has stripped off my glory from me, and my turban has thrown from my head, that he breaks me wherever I go, and has pulled up my hopes like a tree, that he kindled his fury at me, that he treats me as one of his foes. For his troops come advancing in mass, their rampart against me they pile, and encamping encompass my hall. My kinsmen have flown far away, my companions are scattered abroad, they cease to approach and forget. My guests and my maids think me strange, they forget I'm unknown in their sight. My lad replies not if I call, to him I must soften my voice, and my feelings are strange to my wife, and I plead to the sons of my breast. Even children regard me with scorn. When I rise up, they ridicule me. I am loathed by my intimate friends, and those whom I loved turn away. My bones pierce my skin and my flesh. I possess but the skin of my teeth. Oh, pity me, friends, for God's hand is heavy on me. Like God would you persecute me, unsatisfied yet with my flesh? Who will help me to write out my tale? Who will help to record in a book? Or with pen made of iron on lead, or cut deep on a rock for all time? For I know my defender exists, and at last will stand over my dust, and after this skin is destroyed, I shall yet in my flesh gaze on God, whom I shall gaze on for myself. Mine eyes see himself, not another, fulfilling the hopes of my breast. While you cry, why did we pursue when the root of the fact he had found? And you tremble yourselves at the sword, for the sword is the fear of the bad, when at last you discover my judge.
Chapter 20. Zophar the Naamathite, however, answered and said,
Because I am driven by my mind, and I rush from the passion within. Having heard an insulting reproof, I answer with spirited thought. Know you not this from of old, since Adam was placed upon earth, that the triumph of sinners is short, and the joys of the vile but an hour? If he goes up as high as the skies, and his head reaches up to the clouds, like his dung he will perish forever. Those who saw him will ask, Where is he? He will fly like a dream, nor be found, and vanish like visions at night. An eye-glance, for it is no more, and he never returns to his place. His children shall flatter the low, and their hands will repay for his sin. His vices will fill up his bones, and with him lie down in the dust. The vice has been sweet to his taste, concealing it under his tongue, though he fondled and never forsook, but retained in the roof of his mouth. Yet the food in his bowels will turn to the venom of asps in his breast. He will vomit the plunder he gorged. From his stomach his God will be cast. He will suck in the poison of asps. The sting of the adder will kill. He shall not see the pools or the streams of the rivers of honey and oil, nor consume the reward of his work. He carries the wealth, but owns not. For he crushed and abandoned the weak, stole a house that he never had built. For he never knew rest in his greed, he never let slip his desire, and nothing escaped from his knife. His wealth, therefore, will not endure. He has fear in amassing his hoard, that the hand of distress may approach. While he goes to accomplish his greed, fierce wrath is discharged upon him, and is rained as he sits at his food. If he flies from the weapon of iron, he is shot by a bow made of steel. A swift arrow comes up to his back, and it goes to his gall with its barb. All darkness is stored up for him. A fire unblown will consume. It is bad for those left in his tent. The skies will uncover his sins, and against him the earth will rise up, and the wealth of his house flow away like the floods in the day of a storm. Such from God is the fate of bad men, and their portion appointed from God.
Chapter 21. But Job answered and said,
Attentively list to my speech, that may perhaps alter your mind. Bear with me while I myself speak, and after I speak, you can jeer. Is my complaint made to a man? And why should not my spirit be sharp? Look at me, and be not surprised, and place your hand over your mouth. I'm amazed when I think of myself, and trembling takes hold of my flesh. Say, why are the wicked in life? Grow old and are mighty in wealth. Their offspring are sitting by them and playing about in their sight. There is peace in their houses, not fear. God brings no disturbance on them. Their bull genders, and that without fail. Their cow calves without ever a slip. Their children go out like a flock, and their infants are skipping about. They sing to the timbrel and harp, and delight in the sound of the flute. On pleasure they float all their days, and easily go to the grave. Though they say to God, Get far from us, we care not to learn of your ways. For why should we serve the Most High? What our wages for working for him? Do they not enjoy what is nice? Get from me, you villainous thoughts. How seldom the villain's lamp fails, or upon them arrives a distress, distributing griefs in its rage. When are they as straw before wind, or like chaff that the tempest sweeps off? But God stores up grief for her sons. Let him punish their sins on themselves. Let their own eyes perceive the results, and drink the wrath of the Most High. What care they for their house after them, when their number of months has rushed by? But who can teach knowledge to God when he is the judge of the highest? This one dies in perfection of strength, reclining at ease and in peace, with his buckets o'erflowing with milk, and with marrow to moisten his bones. That one dies with his soul full of grief, and never with pleasure could eat. Together they lie in the dust, and over them wallows the worm. Yes, I know of what are your thoughts, and the libels you frame against me. You ask, where the house of the prince, and the hall where he spread out his bed? Why not ask those who pass on the road, on whose evidence you would rely? That the bad escape times of distress, and are led from the dangerous day, who dare tell to his face of his ways, who repay to him what he has done. He is carried away to his tomb, and a guard watches over his mound. The clods of the valley are sweet, and after him all will proceed, as unnumbered before him have gone. Then why do you comfort in vain, since your reasonings result in a lie?
The end of chapters 15 through 21. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 22. Eliphaz the Temanite, however, answered and said, "Can a man be essential to God, as a man of skill may to his like? Does your righteousness profit the highest? Does he gain by your course being straight? For fear of you will he debate, or with you will he go to a judge? Now, is not your wickedness great, and your vices without any end? For your brother you robbed of his pledge, and have stripped from the naked his rags. You quenched not the weary with drink, from the famishing held back his bread. But the powerful, to him gave the land, and the haughty-faced dwelt upon it. You sent starving widows away, and the arms of the fatherless broke. So therefore around you are snares, and terrors unlooked for confound, and darkness that you cannot see, and torrents of water overwhelm. Is not God in the heavens on high, looking over the heads of the stars? But you may ask, what can God know, or distinguish behind the black gloom? Black clouds are around, he sees not, for he walks in the sphere of the skies. You keep to the very old path which the vilest of mortals have trod, who were snatched off before their full time, whose foundations were swept by a flood, who cried to God, "Get far away," and "What gain is the Almighty to us?" He fills up their houses with wealth. Begone your vile statements from me. No, the righteous look on and are glad, and the virtuous laugh him to scorn. Our foeman, they cry, is now wrecked, and the fire will consume his remains. Now make him your friend and have peace. To you the results will be good. Accept now the law from his mouth, and fasten his words on your heart. To the mighty constructor return. Depravity drive from your tent, and throw your gold into the dust. Yes, your gold from the gravelly brooks. And let the Most High be your wealth, and the glitter of silver to you. For then the Almighty will love, and your face you can lift up to God. He will hear you whenever you pray, and he will accomplish your vows, and he will effect your intent, and the light will shine over your ways. Though he humbles, he can say, "Arise." When the eyes are cast down, then he saves, protecting the virtuous home, protecting your unsoiled hands. Chapter 23. Job, however, replied and said,
Very bitter my thought is today, but his hand overpowers my groans. Who will help to discover and find? I would go to the place where he dwells, arranging before him my cause, and with reasonings filling my mouth. I would learn the replies he would give, and understand what he would say. Would he fight me with powerful speech? No, but he would be gentle with me, for the honest can reason with him, so my cause would triumphantly win. Look, I go to the east, he is not. To the west, but I cannot perceive. To the north, where he works, but find not. To the south, where he hides, but unseen. Yet he knows the course that I go. At the test, I stand pure as gold. I have fastened my feet in his steps. Unwavering I kept to his path, not shirking the law of his lips. In my breast I have stored his commands. But him, he is one, who can turn? For what he desires, he does. He will work out his objects with me. But how many are there with him? So excluded his presence, I faint. I reflect, and I tremble at him. For God has deprived me of heart. The Almighty brought trouble to me. Why was I not cut off ere the dark, and before I was covered with gloom?
Chapter 24.
Since times are not hid from the Almighty, why know not his friends his fixed days? For there are removers of landmarks, there are robbers of flocks as they graze. They drive from the orphans their ass, the widow's ox take as a pledge. The wretched they turn from their path, till the poor of the land herd in troops. As wild asses go on the plains, their plunder begins at the dawn, to seize for their followers food. They reap in a field not their own, and with violence pluck off the grapes. The naked they leave without clothes, and without any cover from cold. So they soak in the rain from the hills, and shelterless stick to the rock. The infant they drag from the breast, and the clothes from the wretched as pledge, who without any covering go bare, and who hungering carry their sheaves, and who in their barns press the oil, and tread out their wine, but have thirst. In the city the murdered may groan, and the soul of the tortured may roar, but God pays no heed to their prayer. And others revolt from the light, hate his ways, nor will stay in his path. The murderer detesting the light, who slaughters the wretched and poor, and comes like a thief in the night. The adulterer waits for the dark, when he thinks that no eye can observe, and places a mask on his face. With darkness he enters the home he had marked for himself in the day, that he dare not approach in the light, fearing dawn as the shadow of death. For it seems to his terrors like doom. You say, swiftly he glides down a brook. His lot will be cursed on the earth. To his vineyard he never returns. As drought and heat steal the snow streams, so will the grave those who sin. Reft of love and devoured by worms, the villain is always forgot, and the wicked will break like a stick. For they injure the wretch without child, to the widows they never do good. Yet he strengthens the proud in his power, lifts him up when he thought not to live, and gives to him confident strength, though his eyes can discover his ways. They rise for their time, then depart, and they curl up when perfectly ripe, and are cut like the ears of the corn. And if not, let who will refute me, and fling to oblivion my speech.
Chapter 25. So Bildad the Shuhite replied and said, Dominion and terror are his, enforcing his nobles to peace. And what man can number his troops? And on whom does he not raise his light? And what is man's goodness to God? And who, born of a woman, is clean? The moon to his eyes does not shine, and the stars are not bright in his sight. But man, the poor crawler, much less, Adam's son, who is only a worm. Chapter 26. The Rephaim themselves were destroyed, and rest themselves under the seas. The grave's people are naked to him, and destruction possesses no cloak. He spread out the northern expanse, and suspended the earth upon space. He binds up the streams in his clouds, but the clouds are not ruptured by them. He covers the view of his throne, and over it spreads a black cloud, puts a band on the face of the seas, on the circuits of darkness and light. He shakes the supports of the skies, they tremble before his rebuke. He raises the sea by his might, and by his skill crushes its pride.
The skies are made sweet by his wind, and his hand whirls the serpent along. Look, those are a part of his ways, but of him what a whisper we hear, and his thundering voice who can stand? Job, however, answered and said,
To the helpless, what help do you bring? Have you strengthened the arm without force? To the ignorant, what do you teach or help by the lot that you know? From whom have you stolen your speech, and whose thoughts are sent out through you?
Chapter 27.
God lives, though he turned from my plea, and the Almighty, who bitters my soul. So while ever breath lingers in me, and the Spirit of God in my face, no rubbish shall come from my lips, and my tongue shall not pour out deceit. Curse me if I justify you. Till I die, I'll not turn from my right. To my righteousness I will cling fast, nor the thought of my life be reproached. Let my enemy be like the bad, my opponent become like the vile. For what hope has the rogue, though enriched, when God is demanding his soul? Will God hold back if he shrieks, when upon him the anguish has come? In the Almighty he did not delight, or call upon God at all times. I could teach you the power of God, nor conceal what is with the Most High. But yourselves, all of you can see that. Then why do you babble such stuff?
Zophar the Naamathite, however, answered and said,
This is the lot of the wicked from God, and the scoundrel's fate from the Most High. His children increase for the sword, and his offspring are not filled with bread. His descendants are buried by death, and his widows will never lament. If he heaps up the silver like dust, and piles up his clothing like clay, he may pile, but the righteous will wear, and the virtuous inherit his wealth. He builds up his house like a moth, or a watchman erecting a hut. He lies down without loss and is rich. When he opens his eyes, all is gone. The terrors rush on him like streams. He is ruined by thieves in the night. The east wind will rise, and he flies, and the whirlwind will sweep him from home. It unsparingly sweeps upon him. From its powerful blast he must fly. After him it will clap with its hands, and whistle him out of his home.
Chapter 28.
But for silver there yet is a vein, and a place where they wash out the gold. And iron is obtained from the dust, and copper is smelted from stone. A mine is sunk down to the dark, and its secrets are fully explored. In the black rock and shadow of death, a shaft is sunk down to descend without any rests for the feet. The men hanging on to a swing who bring from earth's bowels their bread, whose basement they tear up with fire, whose rocks are the sapphire's home. In its dust is discovered the gold, in places unknown to the hawk, untraced by the vulture's keen eye. Wild beasts would not travel that road, nor the lion would venture to go. Yet man lays his hand to the flint, he breaks up the roots of the hill. He hews out his drives in the rocks, and his eye searches everything rare. He stops off the trickling streams, and he brings out the hidden to light. But wisdom's home, where can he find, or where is the dwelling of sense? Its origin man cannot know, nor find in the land where we live. Space answers, With me it is not, and the sea says, It rests not in me. Nor for it can bullion be paid, nor payment in silver can buy, nor the gravely nuggets be weighed, or the brightest of diamonds and gems, unequaled by jewels of gold, and unmatched by the glittering stone. Nor can onyx and crystal be named, or wisdom be purchased by pearls. The topaz of Cush equals not, and the chasings on gold cannot buy. From where then can wisdom be got, and where is the home of good sense, if she hides from the eyes of all life, and is hid from the birds of the skies? Destruction and death both declare, we have heard of her fame with our ears. But God only has looked on her ways, and he alone knows of her home. For he looks to the ends of the earth, observing all under the skies, when he fixes the weight of the wind, and measures the seas with a rule, when he makes a decree for the rain, and a wave for the thunderous flash. He sees her and makes a decree, applies her and also approves, and proclaims to mankind, be assured, it is wisdom to fear the supreme, and sense to abandon the wrong.
The end of chapters 22 through 28. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 29. But Job proceeded to take up his contention, and replied,
Who will make me as in former months, as the times when God watched over me, when his lamp brightly shone o'er my head, and his light when I walked in the dark, as I was in the days of my wealth, when God counseled me in my tent, and whilst the Almighty was mine, and servants attended around, when washing my footpath in cream, when the rock poured me ponds full of oil, when I went to the gate through the town, when I spread out my seat in the square, the children, on seeing me, hid, and the elder men rose up and stood. The princes broke off from their speech, and laid their hand over their mouth. The voice of the nobles was still, and their tongue was held close to its roof. And when the ear heard me, it blessed, and the eye that looked on me approved. For I rescued the wretch who appealed, and the destitute who had no help. The perishing brought me their thanks, and I gladdened the poor widow's heart. In goodness I dressed and was clothed. I made justice my robe and my crown. And I became eyes to the blind, and I also was feet to the lame, and a father I was to the poor, and the cause of the friendless I searched. I broke the jaw teeth of the vile, and tore the prey out of their mouth. So I thought I should die in my nest, and add to my days like the sand, that my roots would spread out to the streams, and the dewdrops would rest on my boughs, and my honors be freshened for me, and my bow keep its spring in my hand. Then they waited to listen to me, and were silent to hear my advice. When I had spoke, no one replied, and upon them my sentences dropped. And they waited for me as for rain, and opened their mouths as for showers. If I laughed at them, did they believe? They turned not from the smile on my face. I chose their course, sitting as chief, and I stood as commander of troops. I encouraged them when they despaired.
Chapter 30.
But they now are laughing at me, who are lower in rank than myself, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with the dogs of my flocks. What to me is the strength of their hands, whose whole vigor has wasted away? Gaunt with hunger and famine, they gnawed and raged yesterday in the wastes. and plucking up cress in the bush and the roots of the bracken for food. They were chased away out of our midst. They roared after them as after thieves. They dwelt in the rents of ravines, in holes in the dust and in caves. In the shelter of brushes they brayed, and under the thorns they were wed. Sons of tramps, yes, men with no name. They were driven away from the land. But I am become now their song, and I am become their contempt. They insult, and they wave me away, and refrain not to spit in my face. Since he loosened my nerve and depressed, in my presence they throw off the rein. On the right a mob rise at my feet. They point and heap insults on me. They roughen my paths to annoy, and do mischief that profits them not. They come on as though through a breach. With roaring they roll themselves up. Their terrors are turned upon me. My nobility flies like the wind, and my power has passed like a cloud. My life now is poured out from me, and times of depression have seized. My bones shoot within me at night, and their gnawing will not let me rest. My clothes must be stripped off by force. I am galled by the band of my coat. I am flung out as though I were dirt, and become like to ashes and dust. I shout, but they answer me not. I stand up, but they look not on me. How fiercely upon me you turn to desolate by your strong hand. You lift me to ride on the wind, and melt me away in a mist. For I know you will bring me to death, to the home fixed for all who may live. Yet he lays not his hand on my wreck, though I should be glad of my end. I wept in their time of distress, and troubled my mind for the poor. Yet when I hoped good, evil came. When hoping for light, came the gloom. My bowels boil up and rest not. I'm confronted by days of distress. I am blackened, but not by the heat. I rise in the public and roar. I am come to be brother to snakes, and mate with the daughters of woe. My blackened skin peels off in strips, and my bones are burnt up by the heat. And my harp has become to me grief, and my flute as the sobbing of tears.
Chapter 31.
Yet a treaty I made with my eyes, that I never would look on a maid. Else what part could I have in high God, or share in th' Almighty above? Do not the depraved meet distress, and to practice such vices estrange? Would he not have looked on my ways, and reckoned up every step? Yet if I have walked with the vile, and my footsteps have run to seduce, let him weigh me in scales that are just, then God will acknowledge my truth. If my eyes have turned towards that road, and my heart has gone after my eyes, and defilement has stuck to my hand, let me sow what another will eat, and my crops be pulled up by the roots. If my heart was seducing a wife, if I watched at the door of my friend, for another then let my wife grind, and strangers be lying with her. For that is a cowardly crime, and a wrong for the judges to brand, and a fire consuming to hell, which would root up the whole I produced. If I refused right to my slave or my waitress disputing with me, then what could I do when God rose, and when he inquired, what say? He formed them in the breast like myself, and constructed alike in the womb. If I turned from the plea of the poor, or the eyes of the widow made fail, if I ate of my morsel alone, and the orphan shared naught of the same, like a father I nourished his youth, her I helped from my own mother's breast. If I looked on a tramp without clothes, or the wretched without any cloak, if his joints were not thankful to me when warmed by the fleece of my sheep, if I raised up my hand on the weak when I looked on my power in the court, let my shoulder fall off from its blade, and my arm at its socket be broke. For the reverence of God was on me, and I would not resist his decrees. If my trust I have placed in my gold, or said, I rely on my hoards, if glad that my wealth was so great, and that treasure was found by my hand, if I looked on the sun when it shone, or on the bright moon in her walk, and in secret my heart was seduced, and my hand I have kissed to her face, that also I knew to be wrong, a denial of God the Supreme. If I joyed at the death of my foe, if pleased when he met with distress, or gave up my palate to sin by asking a curse on his life, if the men of my tent ever said, who will give us his meat in our need? No stranger lodged outside my court. To the traveler my doors were unclosed. Had I hidden like Adam my fault, concealing my sin in my breast, as though I had fear of the crowd, dismayed by contempt of the mass, and dare not go out of my door, if my land has shrieked out against me, and its furrows together lament, if I ate of its fruits without pay, and sneered at its owner's demands, let thistles spring up, and not wheat, and instead of the barley, vile weeds. Who will grant me to listen to me? How I wished the Almighty would speak, or my enemy write in a book. I could carry it then on my back. I could place on my head as a wreath. I could tell him the tale of my steps. I would go up to him like a prince.
The end of the speeches of Job. Chapter 32. Those three men then ceased to reply to Job, because he was righteous in his own eyes. But the anger of Elihu ben Barachel the Buzite, of the family of Ram, was inflamed by Job. His anger was inflamed because he justified himself instead of God. His anger was inflamed also against his three friends, because they had not found any explanation, but had declared Job wrong. Elihu, however, had waited for their replies to Job, because they were older than himself. But when Elihu perceived that there was no explanation in the mouths of those three men, his indignation was fired. Consequently Elihu ben Barachel the Buzite replied and said, In days I am young, you are old. I therefore was trembling in fear to declare my discoveries to you. I said to myself, days should speak, and numerous years should be wise. Yet there is a spirit in a man, and the Almighty inspires with sense. The greatest are not always wise, nor the aged perceive what is right. I now therefore say, listen to me. I also my thoughts will declare. Yet I waited to hear your discourse, the thoughts of your minds and research, and considered your reasons to Job. But none of you proved his words wrong. So say not, though wisdom we found, only God can disprove him, not man. Had he laid his discourse before me, I would not have replied with your words. They are baffled and have no reply. Their speeches have vanished from them. I am waiting, but yet they speak not.
Though they stand up, they do not reply. So I answer, yes, I on my part, I will my discoveries declare. For I am filled full with my words. My spirit distresses my breast. My breast is like wine without vent. Like skins newly filled it will burst. I must speak to be able to breathe. I must open my mouth and reply. I fear not the face of a man, and never will flatter mankind. For flattery I never have learnt, or my Maker would soon take me off.
Chapter 33. And perhaps Job will hear my address and attend to the whole of my speech. For now I have opened my mouth. From my palate my tongue will speak out. My true heart will reason and speak. My utterance will gush from my lips. I was made by the Spirit of God. The Almighty's breath gave to me life. Answer me now if you can, and before me now marshal your proofs. See, I am before you for God. Yet I am but formed out of clay, and my terrors can never affright, nor my might be a load upon you. In my hearing you certainly spoke, and the sound of your boasting I heard. I am pure, I am without sin, I am clean, and no vices are mine. Look, he hunts me to find out a fault. He thinks about me as his foe. He fastens my feet in the stocks. He watches about all my paths. I reply, you are not right in this. For as God is superior to man, why should you contend against him when he gives no account of his acts? However, to some God does speak, and to others does he not reveal by dreams and by visions at night, when stupor has fallen on men, in slumbers when laid on their bed? It is then he uncovers men's ears and instructs them about the unseen, to turn men away from their acts and take away pride from the great, to keep back his life from decay and his soul from the ford of the pit. Or he lays him with pain on his bed, and anguish contends with his bones, and his life, it refuses its food, and his body the choicest of meat. His flesh is consumed out of sight, and his bones that were hidden stick out, while his body is nearly dissolved, and his soul is approaching the dead. If an angel is present with him, interceding as one of the friends, to show to the man what is right, then he pities and says, set him free, I relieve from descent to decay. And his flesh is revived as in youth, it returns as in childhood's estate. Then he prays to his God who was kind, and looks on his face with delight, and returns to his duties to man. Then he sings to men, saying, I sinned and did wrong, but he punished me not, but brought back from the ford of the pit, and revived me to look on the light. Be sure that God acts like this, more often than once with a man, to turn back his life from the pit, to rejoice in existence in light. Job, attentively listen to me. Be silent. For more I would speak. But if you can answer me, say, for my wish is to justify you. If not, why then listen to me. Be still while I wisely will teach. Chapter 34. Then Elihu continued to speak, and said, attend, you wise men, to my speech. You philosophers, listen to me. About reasons the ear can decide, as the palate the flavors of food. We can choose out the right for ourselves, and distinguish within what is best. Now Job has said, I have been right, but God took the verdict from me. Although I am right, should I lie? Without fault, I am tortured to death. Whoever of men is like Job, like water he swallows down sin, joins the path of pursuers of vice, and associates with profligate men. For he says, that it profits not man to make himself pleasing to God. But listen, you wise men, to me. God could not be forced to do sin, or the Almighty to execute wrong. But man's actions return on himself, and the tracks of a man find him out. Most certainly God never wrongs. The Almighty does not pervert right. And who for him organized earth, or who for him fixed all the spheres? If he called back the heart and the breath and the life to himself, all would cease, all flesh would expire at once, and man would return to the dust. If you have understanding, hear this, and attend to the sense of my words. Could one who hates law ever rule? And if right, would you charge him with wrong? Would you say to a king, "You're a rogue"? Or to princes, "What villains you are"? Much less to who favors not kings, nor repulses the face of the poor, for his hand has created them all. On a sudden they die at midnight. Men tremble and then pass away, and the mighty fall down without strength. For his eyes are on every man's paths, and he looks upon all of their steps. Nor darkness, nor shadow of death can hide those who wallow in sin. So he need not lay much on a man to bring him to God to be judged. He can suddenly ruin the great, and others set up in their stead. For he is aware of their acts, and o'erthrows in a night, and they fall. He strikes them because they are bad in the place where their splendor appeared, because they turned off from his paths and paid no respect to his ways. So the weak sent their cry up to him, and the shriek of the wretched he heard. When he pacifies, who can disturb? When he covers a face, who can reign? Alike to a nation or man, preventing a vile man to rule, preventing a nation's distress. This should make them exclaim to their God, "I have sinned, but I will not persist. I see nothing, so teach me yourself. If wrong, I will cease from my acts." Should he reward you as you choose, with what you dislike or would wish? I think not. But say what you think. Men of sense will declare as I do, and the wise men will listen to me. Job has spoken beyond what he knows, and his speeches have not had good sense. I wish to see Job fairly tried, not turned out among wicked men. Though rebellious, he joined to his sins, clapped at us, and heaped words up to God. Chapter 35. Elihu spoke again and said,
Think you this to be just that you said, "I myself am more righteous than God"? For you asked, "Would it profit to you? What gain I by freedom from sin?" I myself will reply to your speech, and to your friends as well as yourself. Look up to the heavens and see. Watch the clouds that are far above you. If sinful, what matter to him? How affect him your many revolts? If righteous, what give you to him? And what in your hand do you bring? A man like yourself you may hurt, and your justice may benefit man. Under wrongs the oppressed may shriek, and may groan from the might of the great. But ask not, "Where is God who made me, allowing these tortures at night?" We know more than the beasts of the earth, and are wiser than birds of the sky. We shriek, but he never replies to the face of the tyrants themselves. It is false to say God does not hear, and that the Most High replies not, and more false that he does not see you. He does justice if you will but wait. Does he, when his anger refrains, not recognize manifest crime? Job opens his mouth like a fool. Yes, with folly has loaded his speech. The end of chapters 29 through 35. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 36. Elihu consequently continued and said, "Wait for me, and I will reveal the reasons I still have for God. I will gather my teachings from far and prove that my Maker is right, for I certainly utter no lies. Pure truth is presented to you. God is mighty and does not neglect. He is mighty in power of mind. He does not encourage the bad, but gives the afflicted their right.
From judges he takes not his eyes, or from monarchs who sit on the throne. Whom he sanctions are mighty for aye, but if they are fettered in chains and bound in the cords of distress, he is showing their conduct to them, and the faults that their pride has produced, and uncovers their hearing to learn, and tells them to turn from their sins. If they listen to him and obey, they complete with enjoyment their days, and end up their years in delight. If they hear not, they pass like a dart, and expire in their want of good sense. But the wicked in heart heap up wrath. When he binds them, it is not to save. Their life goes to death in their youth, for their life is among the depraved. But he rescues the wronged from their woes, and opens their ears by distress, and from these present griefs he will lead to a plain unobstructed advance, and rich food will be spread on your board. But your thoughts are filled up with your wrongs. Though reflection and thought should support, your rage should not lead to contempt, when a great ransom could not redeem, nor your wealth would be able to save, nor all the exertions of strength. Ah, do not desire that night, and the path to the nations laid low. To your folly you should not return, for that you preferred to distress. See how lofty God is in his might, for who can enlighten like him? And who for him drew out his plans? Who can say, what you do is absurd? Think, you should exult in his works, for all mankind see him in them, and mortals regard from afar. We know not how noble God is, how unmeasured his number of years, who accumulates mist from the seas, and distributes the vapor in rain, which the storm clouds all scatter around, distilling abundance on man. Ah, who understands the massed clouds that carry his thunders within? Look, he scatters about them his flash, but their roots are concealed in the sea. Yet he governs the nations by them. He gives by them plenty of food. He places the flash on their bows, and directs it go to the mark, and instructs it to show forth for him the wealth of his wrath on the vile. Chapter 37. My heart even trembles at this, and is leaping about in its home. Hark! I hear the deep sound of his rage, and the roll that precedes his advance. It advances beneath all the skies, and its flash to the wings of the earth, and thunder's rough voice follows after with a fierce, irresistible roar. To all who are hearing its sound, God thunders with wonderful voice, effecting great things and unknown. For he says to the snow, see the earth, and to rain showers, pour out your strength. It is marked by the hand of all men, that each one may know of his work. The beasts then retire to their lairs, and roll themselves up in their dens. The hot blast comes up from the south, and the cold wind proceeds from the north. The breath of God gives us the cold, and the wide-spreading waters congeal. Then his splendor dispels the thick cloud, and the mists are dispersed by his light. He revolves all the seasons by rule, to accomplish the work he commands on the face of the earth in its course. In kindness he leads them along, to arrange for the tribes of his earth. Stand up, Job, to listen to this, and examine the wonders of God. Know you all God's process with them when reflecting his light on the mists? Do you know how he balances clouds with wondrous perfection of skill? Or what makes your clothing be warm when the earth is depressed by south winds? Did you for him spread out the skies that are formed like a glass to reflect? Then teach us how him to address. We know not, because we are dull. And must he be told when I speak? Is he ignorant when a man talks? Why, we cannot now look on the light when it glitters about in the clouds, though the passing wind sweeps them away. From the north a gold splendor proceeds. There is terrible glory round God. We cannot discuss the Most High, supreme in his justice and might, whose goodness will never do wrong. Men therefore should reverence him. He regards not the learned. Chapter 38. Then Jehovah answered to Job out of the whirlwind, and said, Who is this that obscures reflection by speeches on what he knows not? Like a hero, now gird up your loins. I will ask you, and you answer me. Where were you when I founded the earth? Inform, if you knew of my plan. Who fixed its extent, since you know? Or who on it stretched out the line? On what were its timberlings laid? Or who fixed its keystone on high? When the stars of the morn sang together, and the sons of God shouted for joy, when the sea was shut up within doors, when it came with a rush from the womb, when I gave it the fogs for a cloak, and in darkness enwrapped it around, and over it laid my decree, and fixed it with bars and with doors, and said, So far you can come, nor advance, but there stay your proud waves. All your days have you governed the dawn, taught the morning to know her own place, with her vesture of roseate bloom, and draped in it as with a robe, to seize on the wings of the earth, and to drive off the bad from her face, and to take from the wicked their light, and the arm they are lifting to wound? Have you gone to the springs of the sea? Have you traversed the limits of space? Have death's portals been opened to you? Have you looked on the gates of despair? Know you all that is done upon earth? Explain, if you know of the whole. Where is the road to the dwelling of light, and where is of darkness the home? Can you guide us as far as their bounds? Do you know the paths to their house? You know, for then you were born, and the number of your days is extreme. Have you been to the countries of snow, and examined the treasure of hail that I hoard for the time of distress, for the day of encounter and war? What path tread the rays of the light, and how spread the winds over earth? Who cut for the typhoon its course, and a road for the lightnings to shine? Who pours rain on the land without men, on the desert where no man resides, to satiate the desert and waste, and to cause a green meadow to grow? And who is the father of the rain, and the drops of the dew, who begot? From whose belly comes out the ice, and the frost of the skies who has made, when the waters congeal like a stone, and it captures the face of the deep? Did you fasten the Pleiades' chain, or scatter the wandering fool? Do you guide the signs of the seasons, or console the North Star and his sons? Have you revealed laws for the skies, or settled the laws of the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, and with water floods cover yourself? If you send lightnings out, will they go and reply, We are ready for you? Who leads out the meteors with skill, or gives to the comets their sight? Who skillfully numbers the clouds? Who pours out the skins of the skies, when the dust is converted to mud, and together the clods of earth stick? Do you hunt for the lion his prey, or fill the young whelps of wild beasts when they lie cowering down in their dens, and hide by themselves in their lairs? Who prepares for the raven its food, when its young ones are shrieking aloud, and are worn out for want of their meat? Chapter 39. Mark the birth time of goats of the rock, and watch the birth throes of gazelles, and count the full period they breed, and observe at the time they bring forth. They contract, and their children leap out. They cast all their sorrows away. Their children are hardy and strong, and run off to reside by themselves. Who sent out the wild asses free? From the zebra who loosened the chain? Whose house I have fixed in the waste, and in the salt marshes its home. It laughs at the crowd of the town, regards not the call of the groom. It feeds on the chance of the hills, and hunts after anything green. Do you wish for the reem as your slave? Would he lodge at the side of your crib? If you harness the reem to your plow, will he harrow the plain after you? Will you trust him because he is strong, and abandon your earnings to him? Or trust him that he will come back and pile up your grain in your barn? Would you trust the loud wing of the ostrich, on her pinions desiring to fly, who abandons her eggs on the earth, and hatches them out on the dust, and forgets that the footstep may crush, or the beast of the pasture may break? Who is hard to her young as not hers, and cares not if she labor in vain? For God has withheld from her sense, and gave her no mind to reflect. Yet, when she has risen to run, she laughs at the rider and horse. Did you give his strength to the horse, clothe his neck with the quivering mane, and make him like a grasshopper leap, and snort in his terrible pride? He paws on the plain, and is glad. With his vigor he charges in fight, eats the ground in his fierceness and rage, unrestrained at the sound of the horn. At the blast of the trumpet he neighs, and snorts for the battle from far, for the thundering captains and cheers. He laughs undismayed at its woes, nor shrinks from the face of the sword, though on him the arrows may pour, and the flash of the spear and the dart. By your intellect do swallows fly, and spread out their wings for the south? Does the eagle mount up at your word, and build up his nest on the peak, and settle his home on the crag, and his foot on the ledge of a cliff, from where he can spy out his prey, whence his eyes can perceive it from far? His fledglings there suck up the blood, and he is where the slain bodies lie. Chapter 40. The Lord also continued and said, Is the Almighty's appellant content? Has the critic of God a reply? Then Job answered and said, I was foolish. What can I reply? So my hand I lay over my mouth. I spoke once, but will not speak again. Nay, twice, but I will not repeat. Again Jehovah answered Job out of the whirlwind, and said, Then gird up your waist like a man. I will ask you, and you instruct me. How can you my judgments reverse? Convict me, and set yourself free. Or is your arm equal to God's, and can your voice thunder like his? Deck yourself now with glory and might, and clothe you in splendor and power. Fling round you your anger and wrath, and examine the proud and o'erthrow. Examine and humble the fierce, depressing the bad by their acts, and hide them together in dust, and blindfold their faces from light. And I then will congratulate you that your right hand can rescue yourself. See Behemoth, my work like yourself. He feeds upon grass like an ox. His power is placed in his loins, and force in his obstinate breast. Like a cedar he flashes his tail. His thighs are a muscular plate. His bones are as pieces of steel, like forgings of iron his frame. He is chief of the products of God. He who made can destroy with his sword. Then the mountains produce him his food, where all beasts of the field sport about. Under willows he lies down to sleep, in the shade of the reeds and the fens. The willow tree's shade is his tent, and the bush of the valley surrounds. He fears not the furious flood. He is calm, though streams rush in his face. Who can catch him when laid on the watch, or who run a rope through his nose? Is Leviathan caught with a hook? Can they tie down his tongue with a cord, or put a straw rope through his nose, or pierce through his jaws with a thorn? Will he multiply pleadings to you, or address you in flattering words? Will he write out a treaty with you to be your perpetual slave? Can you play with him as with a bird, or put in a cage for your girls? Can your friends make a feast off of him, or can he to merchants be sold? Can you pierce with your prickling his skin, or his head with the spear used for fish? Once touch him, you will not forget. You never again will assail. Chapter 41. Why, to try for him would be in vain.
One drops, if but looking at him. I will not relate of his limbs, his courage and power and form. Who dare open his mouth for a bit, or bring double bridle to him? Who dare open the doors of his mouth, surrounded with terrible teeth? His back is the bosses of shields, pressed close with the print of a seal, where every one sticks to his mate, and the wind cannot go in between. For every one holds in its place, they grasp, and they cannot be split. And when he is sneezing, light shines, and his eyes are the eyelids of dawn. And flashes come out of his mouth, and sparkles of fire escape. From his nostrils a vapor proceeds, like flame from a furnace or straw. His breath is the burning of coals, and flames proceed out of his mouth. His vigor sits down on his neck, and terror precedes his advance. The flakes of his flesh stick as one, so close that they cannot be moved. His heart is as hard as a stone, yes, as hard as the stone of a mill. When he rises, the brave are dismayed. They stagger as though in the waves. If the sword reach, it will not pierce him, nor the spear, or the stone, or the dart. He fancies that iron is straw, and the steel to be mere rotten wood. No arrows can turn him to flight. Sling stones he converts into chaff. He thinks that the club is a rush, and laughs at the shake of a spear. And his sharp-pointed claws are beneath, supporting his course on the mud. He makes the deep boil like a pot, and embroiders the water with foam. And after his passage it shines. It seems that the depths have turned gray. On the dust there is nowhere his match, who was made so as not to feel fear. He gazes on all that is great. He is king over all the wild beasts. Who are you who dare not arouse him, yet who dare resist me to my face? Who has worked for me? I will repay. All under the heavens is mine.
Chapter 42. Then Job answered and said, I know that your power is supreme, and your purpose cannot be withstood. Who am I, who hid fact without thought, and spoke what I never could know, of acts that I understood not, when I said, Listen, and I will speak. I will question, and you must reply. I had heard of you once by my ear, but now I have seen with my eyes. So I am convinced, and repent, on the dust, and in ashes reclined. Now it occurred that after Jehovah had addressed these discourses to Job, that Jehovah said to Eliphaz the Temanite, My anger burns against you and your two friends, for you have not reasoned correctly about me, like my servant Job. So now choose for yourselves 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer a sacrifice for yourselves, when my servant Job will pray for you. For I will accept his presence, so that I may not do any injury to you, because you have not reasoned correctly about me, like my servant Job. Consequently, Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite went and did as the ever-living commanded them, and the ever-living accepted the presence of Job. Then the ever-living removed the miseries of Job when he prayed for his friends, and the ever-living gave Job twice as much as he had formerly. And his brothers and sisters came to him, with all his acquaintance, to congratulate him, and ate bread with him in his home, and condoled with him, and comforted him over all the suffering that the Lord had laid upon him. And each of them gave him a lamb, and every one a ring of gold. The ever-living thus blessed Job more than formerly, and he possessed 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she-asses. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and called the first of them Jemimah, and the second Keziah, and the name of the third was Keren-happuch. and in all the country none were found so beautiful as the daughters of Job. Their father gave them fortunes as well as to their brothers. Job lived after this 140 years, and saw his sons and grandsons and great-grandsons of the 4th generation. Then Job died, an old man and satiated with years. The end of the book of Job. Recording by Mark Penfold.